Marriage is one of the oldest human institutions on Earth, older than churches, older than governments, older than agriculture. Right now, you probably know someone who's married, or someone who's about to get married, or someone who just got divorced, and the last time you thought about marriage, you probably didn't think about it as a strange thing. You thought of it as the default. Two people, one promise, signed paperwork, a party. But what marriage actually is, where it came from, and why humans started doing it at all is way older and way weirder than you've been led to believe. Because our relationship with pair bonding doesn't start with a wedding in some medieval village or a temple ceremony in ancient Egypt. It starts about 4 million years ago with a change in the human skeleton that happened on the savannas of Africa. In 2009, a team of anthropologists led by C. Owen Lovejoy published a study in Science on a 4 million-year-old human ancestor called Ardipithecus ramidus, also known as Ardi. Ardi's skeleton showed something nobody expected. The males of her species had unusually small canine teeth. In almost every other primate, males have massive, sharp canines used to fight other males for access to females. Chimpanzee males have them, gorilla males have them, but Ardi's males didn't. Their teeth had shrunk. And Lovejoy's argument was that this is one of the earliest physical signs of pair bonding in our lineage. The males weren't fighting each other anymore. They were forming long-term partnerships with individual females. Marriage, in its most primitive form, may be 4 million years old. Think about what that means. Around 4 million years ago, something happened in Africa that selected hard for males who stayed with one female instead of fighting every other male for access to many. The leading theory is that human babies were already starting to be born helpless. Helpless babies need a lot of care. A mother alone couldn't gather enough food and protect a child at the same time. So the females who paired up with males who actually stuck around and provided food had babies that survived. And the males who stuck around had more surviving children than the males who didn't. Over 1 million years, this preference got baked in. Pair bonding wasn't a moral invention, it was a survival strategy. By the time modern humans showed up, the impulse to find one person and stay with them was already written into the genome. The question is, when did our ancestors stop pair bonding by instinct and start formalizing it on purpose? Now let's jump to 26,000 years ago. In 2017, archaeologists studying burial sites in the Czech Republic found something striking. At a site called Dolní Věstonice, dated to around 26,000 years ago, 3 young people had been buried together in a single grave. One male in the middle, with 2 others on either side, all carefully arranged, decorated with ivory beads, and covered in red ochre. The arrangement was deliberate. The objects buried with them showed they were important. Whoever buried them treated them as a unit. They weren't just 3 random people who happened to die at the same time. They were bound together in life and bound together in death. This is one of the oldest pieces of physical evidence we have for humans treating relationships as permanent. The Natufians, a hunter-gatherer group living in the Middle East about 13,000 years ago, took it further. At Natufian sites like Ain Malaha, archaeologists have found double burials, a man and woman placed together facing each other, sometimes with their arms arranged in embrace. These weren't accidents. The bodies were positioned, and these were people still living before agriculture, still moving from camp to camp, still hunting and gathering. They cared enough about pair bonds to mark them in death. And they aren't the only ones. Fast forward to ancient Mesopotamia. About 7,000 years later, somebody wrote down the first known marriage laws in human history. The Code of Ur-Nammu, dating to around 2100 BCE, is one of the oldest written legal documents we have. And a huge portion of it is about marriage, how to enter one, how to leave one. What happens if a husband cheats? What happens if a wife is falsely accused? What happens to the children when the marriage ends? The fact that these laws had to be written down tells you something important. People were already getting married all the time. The laws weren't inventing marriage, they were catching up to it. This is where the anthropologist Helen Fisher comes in. Fisher has spent her entire career studying the biology and history of human pair bonding. She's been called the leading expert on the science of love. And for decades, she's been arguing something that contradicts most of what people assume about marriage. She thinks lifelong monogamy isn't actually the human default. She thinks the default is what she calls serial monogamy, paired with constant low-level cheating. This is different from polygyny, where one person has multiple spouses simultaneously. Fisher argues we're built for one partner at a time, but not necessarily the same partner forever. Her argument is simple. If you look at hunter-gatherer societies that still exist today and at the historical record of every culture humans have ever built, you find the same pattern over and over. People pair up. They stay together for about 4 years on average, the time it takes to get a child through the most vulnerable stage of early development. Then a significant percentage of those pairs break up. The people repair with new partners. They have more children. They break up again. And throughout all of it, secret affairs are extremely common. Fisher argues that humans evolved to be sequentially monogamous, not eternally monogamous. The till death do us part idea is a relatively recent cultural overlay, not a biological mandate. If Fisher is right, the whole story of marriage changes. Marriage wasn't invented to lock two people together for life. It was invented to give children enough stability to survive the first few years and to organize property, alliances, and inheritance between families. Everything that followed, the religious ceremonies, the legal contracts, the romantic ideals, the white dress, came downstream of a much older and much more practical arrangement that had almost nothing to do with love. By around 1750 BCE, the evidence stops being scattered. The Code of Hammurabi, the most famous legal document of the ancient world, contains dozens of marriage laws. Marriage contracts were written down, bride prices were set, dowries were regulated, divorce procedures were spelled out. By that point, marriage wasn't just a personal arrangement. It was a legal institution. It was property. It was politics. From there, marriage becomes the backbone of every civilization we know about. The Egyptians married for both love and legal status, and royal siblings often married each other to keep bloodlines pure. The Greeks treated marriage primarily as an economic and political alliance between two families, with romantic love considered a separate and slightly suspect thing usually found outside the marriage. The Romans had multiple forms of marriage, including one where the wife technically remained under her father's authority instead of her husband's. And in almost every ancient civilization, marriage was about families merging, property transferring, and children being legitimized. The idea that you should marry the person you're in love with is shockingly recent. For most of recorded history, love was a bonus, not a requirement. So here's the full picture. About 4 million years ago, a change in the human skeleton suggests our ancestors started pair bonding instead of fighting for mates. About 26,000 years ago, they were burying people together in arrangements that showed those bonds mattered. About 13,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers were already marking pair bonds in death. About 4,100 years ago, the first written marriage laws appeared. About 3,750 years ago, marriage was a full legal institution with contracts and dowries. And about 250 years ago, we added something almost no ancient culture would have recognized: the idea that the entire point of marriage is romantic love. Interestingly, Helen Fisher's brain imaging research has shown that the parts of the brain activated when you're in love with a new partner are the same parts activated by cocaine, specifically the dopamine reward system and areas rich in oxytocin receptors. Romantic love, biologically speaking, is an addiction driven by these neurochemicals, and like all addictions, it has a half-life. Marriage didn't show up because humans invented love. There's a real chance it showed up because humans invented helplessness. Helpless babies needed two parents. Two parents needed a reason to stay together. And the reason we eventually built ceremony, contract, public promise became one of the most powerful organizing institutions in human history. Every time you go to a wedding, you're watching a ritual that started in some form 4 million years ago when a male primate in Africa stopped fighting other males and started bringing food back to one female and her child. The ceremonies got more complicated. The dresses got fancier, the legal paperwork got longer, but the impulse is the same. We pair up because something in us, written into our bones long before we had a word for it, knows we're not supposed to do this alone.